They didn't just fire me, they erased me. 20 years gone with a single envelope. But you can't discard a man who knows where the bodies are buried, and I knew everything. If you love stories of cold revenge, corporate betrayal, and poetic justice, like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because some payback doesn't come with bullets. It comes with silence. The day started like any other. I made coffee. Bacon sizzled. The sun poured through the kitchen windows as I skimmed the headlines, glasses fogging slightly from the steam. Elena leaned against the counter in her robe, reviewing early messages from the hospital. Sophie, our 15-year-old, was glued to her phone, eating cereal like it was a mechanical task. It was normal, comforting. Before I left, Elena smiled up at me. Another day of brilliance? I kissed her head, just keeping the grid humming. I said goodbye, grabbed my keys, and headed out, same as I had for the last 20 years. But the moment I pulled into the Langford Utilities garage, I had this strange tightening in my chest. I looked up at the big glass building and muttered under my breath, "Here we go again." I didn't know it'd be the last time. I didn't even make it to my desk. Andrea from HR was waiting for me in the lobby, eyes soft but avoidant. "Jack, Lisa wants to see you upstairs." Something in her voice made my stomach drop. It wasn't just the way she said it. It was what she didn't say. No greeting, no small talk, not even her usual nervous smile. Just that line. I followed her to the HR suite. I'd only ever been there for onboarding new hires or signing budgetary paperwork. Now it felt like walking into a sterile execution chamber. My heartbeat began to pick up, but I didn't ask questions. Lisa Green, head of HR, sat alone at the far end of a sterile glass conference room. There was no coffee, no warm greeting, not even a nod. Just the folder in front of her and that practiced corporate neutrality on her face. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. She slid the envelope across the desk like it was a jury verdict. I opened it with numb fingers. My ears started ringing. This high-pitched, unnatural whine, like a blown fuse or a fire alarm buried deep in my skull. The words on the page blurred as I tried to focus. Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated due to structural changes to maximize shareholder return. You are entitled to an 8-week severance package. That was it. 20 years of work. $8 million worth of projects under my belt. Nights and weekends given up, family events rescheduled or missed. The late-night calls. The black coffee and silence. The damn loyalty. 2 sentences and a severance check. No thank you. No explanation. Just pure corporate cowardice sealed in an envelope numbered 10. I looked up. Lisa kept her eyes on the table. Like I was already gone. You can gather your things. Security will escort you down. We appreciate your contributions. Appreciate. The word felt like salt in an open wound. I'd heard it used before. I knew what it meant. It meant goodbye, and please don't sue us. I didn't say a word. I walked out with the envelope in my hand, barely remembering how my legs moved. The hallway looked warped, as if I was walking underwater. As I reached the elevators, a few people looked up from their desks. Some froze, mouths parting like they wanted to speak, but couldn't. Others didn't look at all, like ignoring it would protect them from catching the same disease. The worst were the sympathetic ones. Their eyes said it all. Poor Jack. Hard worker. He didn't deserve that. But none of them said a word, because silence was safer. I called Elena. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sat in the driver's seat of my old silver Accord, parked in the shadow of the building I'd given nearly 2 decades to. My hands trembled against the wheel. I could feel the heat behind my eyes, but I refused to let it fall. Everything outside the windshield looked distant, like I was staring at a photograph. Too real to be fake, too wrong to be true. I dialed a 3rd time. Voicemail. I stared at the HR envelope in the passenger seat. The words shareholder return echoed in my head like a taunt. That was the reason. Not misconduct, not incompetence, just the illusion of better profit margins. They dumped me like a broken circuit, and all I could think was, they think this is over. They think I'll vanish quietly, like a ghost. They're about to ruin my life. They'll suffer too. I pray they do, ungrateful cowards. When I got home, Elena opened the door with her usual warm smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel. For a second, everything looked exactly how it should. The soft light in the kitchen, the faint sound of the evening news drifting from the living room, the scent of garlic and rosemary. But then she saw my face. Her smile fell. What is it? I couldn't even walk past the threshold. I just stood there, my briefcase still in my hand. They cut me, I said. Eliminated the position. No warning. Just done. She stared at me, unblinking. You're joking. I shook my head slowly. My throat tightened as I spoke. They outsourced all new projects. All $2 million worth. To that external firm, the one I used to audit. I watched her hands tremble slightly. Her mouth opened, closed again. The words were there, but they refused to come out. She stepped forward, reached for me like she wasn't sure I was real. But, your severance? I let out a bitter chuckle. 2 months. That's it. Just enough time to realize how badly we're about to get screwed. She blinked hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. But when I said it out loud, 2 months, the tears came fast. Her face crumpled. She reached for me and pulled me in like she could hold the world together with just her arms. We'll be okay, she whispered against my chest. We'll get through it. We always do. God, I wanted to believe her. But I couldn't. That night was long. The quiet in the house was louder than I'd ever known it. Our daughter, Sophie, peeked her head in once or twice. She knew something was wrong, but didn't press. I could hear her soft music through the wall, and it only made things worse. That was my job, providing her a life where music, not worry, filled her nights. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Elena dozed off beside me, her breath soft and shallow like even her dreams were afraid to go too deep. I couldn't sleep. My chest felt like it had caved in. My mind was on fire with questions I couldn't answer. Why me? I was good at what I did. Why now? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that damn letter. The cheap envelope. The clinical tone. To maximize shareholder return. Like I was just another expense line in a spreadsheet. I kept seeing the faces from the office. The half-hearted shrugs. The averted eyes. Not a single person said a word as I walked out. They knew. They all knew. I got up around 3 a.m., walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were still shaking. I leaned against the counter in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I could feel the pressure in my chest like something was pushing against me from the inside. Not grief. Not sadness. Rage. Pure, focused rage. I kept picturing the smug executive team, all high-fiving each other over a cost-saving move, outsourcing everything I built to a firm I personally vetted and rejected more than once for cutting corners. They thought they could replace me with a contract and a few shiny presentations. They had no idea. My wife was right. We'd get through it. But not just by surviving. No, they were going to learn, not just regret. They were going to feel it. If only I knew how wrong I was. The job hunt nearly broke me. Every morning felt like dragging myself through wet cement. I'd wake up, pour 2 cups of coffee, one for Elena, one for me, and stare at the blinking cursor on my resume for an hour before sending out applications that felt like messages in bottles. Job boards, cold emails, reactivating an old LinkedIn profile I hadn't touched in a decade. I reached out to former colleagues, Some replied out of politeness. Others just ghosted. I had 3 interviews in the first 3 months. The first one never followed up. The second said I was overqualified. The third just didn't call back at all. Turns out, when you're 56, companies don't see experience. They see expiration. They don't care how many projects you delivered under budget, how many systems you optimized, or how many crises you averted. And you start to wonder if maybe they're right. I tried to stay strong for Elena and Sophie, told myself it was temporary. But every rejection chipped away at me until the man in the mirror started looking like someone else entirely. Smaller, slower, bitter. Eventually, I stopped chasing full-time positions. The silence had become too heavy. Instead, I took on contract work. Utility consults, small grid inspections, rewiring approvals, battery replacement plans for local solar cooperatives. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't steady, but it paid a few bills. It kept the lights on. Some weeks, I had work every day. Others, I stared out the window wondering what the hell I'd become. A glorified freelancer with no benefits, no pension, and no leverage. I used to run a division. Now I was sending invoices to mid-level managers who were younger than me. But I kept going. Elena picked up overtime at the clinic. Quietly, without complaint. We canceled our vacation, the one we'd planned to celebrate our 25th anniversary. Sophie, God bless that kid, offered to drop her dance classes. I remember the way she said it. "It's okay, Dad. I don't need them. I can dance in the garage." I nearly broke in two right there. "No," I told her. "You keep dancing." I lied and told her we were fine, that we'd bounce back, that this was just a phase. But inside, I was unraveling. Every day, I checked the news, hoping, praying, that Langford Engineering had collapsed under its own incompetence, that the firm they outsourced to would screw up a major system design, that some city contract would go sideways, that someone would realize what a colossal mistake they made cutting me loose. But no, nothing. Langford kept chugging along, smiling in quarterly earnings reports, shaking hands at trade expos, getting glowing write-ups in industry magazines. I hated them for it. It was like being pushed off a boat and watching it sail away while everyone on board sipped champagne. The bitterness started to rot something inside me. I didn't just want them to fail anymore. I wanted to witness it. I wanted front row seats. But all I had were long nights, short invoices, and the echo of my own regrets. Still, Elena held the line. She never once made me feel like I'd failed her. She kissed me goodnight every night, even when I barely spoke. She held my hand at dinner, even when I couldn't eat. She believed in me, even when I didn't. And slowly, over time, something started to shift. It came quietly, in the middle of a job inspecting an energy station for a municipality upstate. The project head, a guy named Nate Halvorson, ex-Army, sharp, and strangely intuitive, struck up a conversation with me during a break. "You've got good instincts," he said, pointing at a misaligned feed schematic I caught before it could have caused a short. "Ever thought about going into auditing? Not flashy, but it's honest work. Could use people who still give a damn." I told him I wasn't sure. He smiled. "Not asking for your soul, Jack. Just your eyes and your backbone." He made a call that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I was sitting through onboarding at a state contractor's office, learning how to audit municipal energy programs and quality assurance. It didn't pay a fortune. It wasn't full-time at first, but it was something. Structure and dignity. A job that needed me. It was the first time in over a year that I didn't feel invisible. And for a while, I almost forgot about Langford. About the letter. about the cold way they stripped away nearly 3 decades of my life like it was dead weight. But fate, or irony, or karma, wasn't done with me yet. Because one day, a notice came in. My team had been assigned a large-scale regional audit of subcontracted electrical infrastructure firms. And guess who was on the list? Langford Engineering. It felt like the past was stalking me. 3 years had gone by since the day I was fired, but when Langford's name showed up on our audit docket, the breath left my lungs. It was a multi-million-dollar state energy initiative, grid modernization, smart meter rollouts, rural electrification plans, and Langford had landed the lion's share of it through a government subcontract. I was assigned as co-lead on quality control and financial reconciliation. I stared at the name on the briefing packet for nearly 5 minutes. Langford Engineering. Here we go again, I thought. But this time, I wasn't walking into their building as an employee. I was walking in as a watchdog. From day one, I noticed something was off. The numbers didn't align. Material costs were inflated. Some components listed on invoices didn't match what was installed on-site. Certain suppliers weren't even registered as licensed vendors. It was all subtle, well-disguised, the kind of thing only someone who knew Langford's internal habits could catch. And I knew, intimately. I flagged the issues to my co-auditor, Ray Morales, sharp guy, ex-utility compliance officer. He raised an eyebrow when I pointed out the inconsistencies, but didn't say much. Just took notes, nodded, and marked the findings for internal review. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid next to Elena staring at the ceiling, heart racing like I was 20 again. Not from fear, from the realization. I had them. Finally, the next morning, a call came. Blocked number. Smooth voice. Mr. Morrison, the man said, "We understand you're handling the Langford account. We'd like to ensure that things move forward amicably. Perhaps there's a way to streamline the process." I didn't say a word. He continued, $500,000. In cryptocurrency, wallet details can be sent to an address of your choosing. You and your partner, clean split. All we ask is that you let the irregularities slide. My mouth went dry. $500,000. Enough to wipe out our mortgage, pay for Sophie's college twice over, maybe even retire early. All in crypto. Untraceable. Unreportable. If I was careful. I hung up without responding. But I didn't report it. Not yet. That night, I told Elena everything. I expected anger, shock, fear. Instead, she sat in silence for a long time, staring at the table. Then she looked up. "You do your job, Jack," she said. "If they come to you again, decline. Report it. No shortcuts. No back doors." She was right. Of course she was. And deep down, I wanted them to bleed too, but $500,000? 3 days after the initial call, the same voice returned. This time, there was no sales pitch, no pretense. It was a statement of fact. Transfer complete. It'll show up in your wallet under standard anonymized routing. We're trusting you, Mr. Morrison. There was no threat, but the weight behind those words was cold and clear. You're in now. I didn't respond immediately. Just silence between us. On the other end, I could hear the faint buzz of an office air conditioner, and then a click. He hung up. I stood still for a long time. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Then I opened the encrypted wallet I'd created nearly a year ago, during a cybersecurity training, of all things. At the time, I'd only wanted to understand how laundering protocols worked in decentralized finance systems. Just for knowledge. I never imagined I'd be standing here, using that knowledge for something real. 10 seconds. That's how long I stared at the screen before copying the address and pasting it into a message. I sent it. Nothing happened for a moment. Then, ping. Balance received. $500,000 USDT. No name. No receipt. No message. Just money. I met Ray Morales later that night. It was in the back corner of a quiet bar in East Ridge. Ray was already there, sipping a club soda like he didn't just help bury a federal compliance violation under a vault of crypto and plausible deniability. "Yours come through?" he asked, without looking up. I nodded. "Clean." We sat in silence for a few beats. The kind of silence that buzzes with what isn't being said. Then he leaned in. "If this ever comes back up, we didn't see everything." I raised an eyebrow. "You think it might?" Ray shrugged. "Someone always talks. Not us. But maybe someone else down the chain. A contractor. A clerk. An intern who hears too much. And if they ask?" He looked me square in the eyes. "We did our job. Quality discrepancies were noted. Questions were raised. Langford issued responses. End of story. And the bribe?" Ray took a slow sip. "There was no bribe. There was a private investment transaction. We took a position in digital infrastructure. The market changed. We withdrew. It was rehearsed, efficient, ironclad." I smiled. "You've done this before." "No," he said. "But I've seen people who weren't ready. And they're the ones who get caught." That night, lying in bed, I watched the ceiling fan spin in slow circles. I didn't sleep. $500,000 buys you peace, but not rest. Elena stirred beside me once, turned toward me in her sleep, and mumbled something soft. I didn't catch it. I thought of Sophie, of her college fund, of the nights I sat in the dark wondering how we'd pay the mortgage, of how Langford had crushed me, erased me, for the sake of shareholder value. And now, I had something back. I had balance, but I also had blood on my hands. Not literal, but real just the same. I'd taken their money. I'd helped cover their fraud. And as I drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep, one thought repeated over and over in my head. Be careful what you accept. You might have to carry it forever. The money was quiet. It didn't come with fireworks or new cars in the driveway. It came with silence, the kind you don't speak of, not even to the people you love. I paid off the mortgage. Not all at once, too suspicious. Just enough, incrementally, to shave years off the loan until the bank balance looked cleaner than it ever had. I started putting money into a fund for Sophie's college, slowly and carefully. Contributions came monthly. Conservative investments. Nothing flashy. Enough to buy her options we couldn't afford when I was patching together contract gigs just to keep the lights on. Elena knew something had changed. Not just the money, but the calm that followed it. I wasn't scrambling anymore. I didn't flinch at grocery bills. We weren't talking in hushed tones about whether to fix the dryer or just let it limp along another month. "Jack," she said one night as we were doing dishes, "what's going on?" I looked at her. The woman who'd stood by me when I came home with my soul hollowed out by a single envelope from Langford. "I made something back," I said. "An old bet paid off." She didn't press. Not really. Just gave me that look. The one that said, "I don't know what you did, but I trust you, and I hope you can live with it." I kissed her hand, and neither of us brought it up again. Langford, meanwhile, went from success to success. Their new leadership leaned into rebranding, pumping out press releases and corporate interviews. Resilience, efficiency, lean excellence. Buzzwords dressed in confidence. The issues Ray and I buried, they stayed buried. Even the complaints I'd seeded. Quietly, from burner accounts to municipalities and hospital networks didn't stick. Langford's legal team was too fast, the settlements too tempting, the NDAs too tight. They walked through the storm dry. 2 years passed, and Langford became something of a case study in aggressive growth. They landed new federal contracts, infrastructure projects, renewable energy developments, a smart grid pilot in Denver. They were winning, and I was watching. Part of me still hoped they'd slip, that the rot I knew was there would eventually crawl to the surface. But part of me, the tired, aging part that just wanted to protect his family, whispered, "Let it go." I was on my way home when the news broke. Partial grid failure in Denver. Langford engineering under scrutiny. A spring lightning storm had struck a transformer near Langford's flagship smart grid project. What should have been an isolated fault cascaded through the system. 2 hospitals lost backup power. One had to manually transfer critical patients. A pediatric cancer ward had equipment fail mid-surgery. That was the headline. But the subtext was even worse. An emergency review by the city found poor quality insulators, faulty regulators, and incomplete compliance documentation, all from Langford's install phase. Cheap components, swapped materials, internal shortcuts, all the things I remembered seeing and signing off on. Their statements came fast. Sabotage, legacy infrastructure weaknesses, unrelated weather event. But this time, it didn't work. Whistleblowers emerged, some who'd been at Langford during the restructure. A few former contractors spoke to reporters, off the record. The Denver City Council called for an independent inquiry. The buzzwords didn't work anymore. Clients began pulling out. Investors stopped returning calls. 3 more state contracts were frozen pending review. Langford was hemorrhaging trust, and trust was the one thing even PR spin couldn't fake. I sat in my car, engine off, and watched the foot. I just kept the receipts. I sat in my car long after the news clip ended, phone screen dimming in my hand. A part of me felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just stillness. Langford was bleeding out in the open now. Analysts were calling it structural oversight. Investors were panicking. Emergency board meetings were leaking to the press. It had finally happened, but not because of anything I'd done recently. Just because they were who they'd always been, reckless, greedy, and too arrogant to think anyone would ever notice. And in the quiet of my car, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. For 2 years, I'd carried the weight of that crypto deal like a loaded gun under my coat, always ready to lie, to explain, to play innocent, just in case. Now, it didn't matter anymore. No one cared. They had bigger problems to answer for. I thought about Elena. About the nights we lay in bed whispering through anxiety, deciding whether to pay the power bill or the car insurance. I thought about Sophie, how she'd never once asked for anything, how she'd quietly stopped bringing up college tours because she didn't want to stress us. They took that from us. Langford stole peace from my home and replaced it with dread. So I took something back. Was it clean? No, but it was mine. $500,000 in cryptocurrency. Never traced. Never acknowledged. And it bought my family breathing room. College security. A home we wouldn't lose. I told myself it wasn't revenge. Not really. I hadn't burned them down. I hadn't falsified records. I hadn't even spoken up when the storm hit Denver. But I hadn't warned them either. I could have. I knew the weak points in their quality chain, the shady vendors they funneled through shell companies to mask substandard supplies. I'd signed off on some of it, back when I still thought I needed to. But I stayed silent. Because silence was the only form of justice left to me. The only weapon they couldn't strip from my hands. So yeah, maybe I played a part. But if I'm being honest, I sleep better now. Langford was going to fall whether I nudged them or not. But at least this way, I didn't fall with them. They took everything and left me with nothing. But I took back my dignity, my peace, and a piece of them too. I didn't burn the house down. I just let it rot from the inside. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Drop your reply in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.